This is Chris. He is an Indonesian business owner. His business was doing just fine until 2020 when a virus called COVID-19 came and disrupted many businesses around the world, including his. In the midst of the crisis, he was overwhelmed as to what he should do to keep his business afloat, especially because his business is still brick and mortar. With everything being done online these days, he doesn't know how to maintain customer relations without a physical store, how to deliver services to customers with new behaviors, how to keep his customers informed and connected to his brand, and many more.
Hey Chris, today's your lucky day. All your questions and doubts will be answered in the next few minutes. This video will help you, the brands, navigate and leverage the crisis.
This video is going to be divided into 3 parts representing the 3 different levels of change that firms could make during a crisis.
Now we have an industry expert right here by my side. And let's start with the first question. So in the short-term phase, you can see that brands are facing instability. So what do you think brands can do to accommodate this situation?
I think in the short-term phase, a brand has to be agile enough and do whatever it can to save the business. I think it has to see the most tangible and fast-paced things to do to tackle the crisis temporarily. And I think one of the most noticeable things to do is to spend more or smarter for less. So how brands can make every amount of money counts.
I think that's a very smart answer from you, Pamela. Maybe you can give an example of Indonesian brands to support your answer?
I think the fantastic example would be Unilever Indonesia, since it has cut its major advertisement and also search for cheaper media to make savings during this kind of pandemic. Not only that, it has also allocated its budget because there is a changes in the consumer spending because there has been a surge like in the hygienic products and many more, while there is a huge reduction in the hairstyling products, deodorants, and many more. And I think aside from that, another suitable example would be PT Angkasa Pura Persero number 2, because it has stopped the operation of flight train Kalayang to be substituted by the shuttle bus for the airport transportation, because we know that the number of airline passengers are decreasing these days.
I see, that's a fantastic way to survive during this pandemic. So is there any other things that brands can do?
Another way that a brand can do is to engage in all audiences and stakeholders. So to provide common benefit, and I think share value programs like One for All. And I think the greatest example here will be the collaboration between Gojek, Tata, and Mocha, because those 3 amazing brands create a movement to support local brands. So they sell F&B coupons, beauty product coupons, and many more other coupons with special price, a lot of cheaper price in their Gojek application, and also support local brands on ID website for their customers. And those coupons can only be used to buy the products of local brands. And by doing this, of course, these 3 brands can increase their brand awareness, and not only that, the most importantly, they can also support the local entrepreneurs, especially there has been a surge in the sales during this kind of pandemic.
How about the actions of brand trying to prevent the spread of the virus? Is it one of the ways that brands can do to, survive during this pandemic?
Yeah, that's called the meaningful purpose of the brands, either perhaps to limit the spread of the virus or perhaps to keep the livelihood going. So I think the suitable example for the first one is PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia, Telkom, because it has taken several steps to prevent the spread of the virus, because it restricts its employees to travel abroad, and then it socializes the symptoms of the disease towards its employees, and many more things towards the actions for COVID-19. But not only that, the amazing thing, it has also helped the Wisma Atlet Kemayoran as one of the emergency hospital for COVID-19. So it provides reliable telecommunication services so that the medical personnel it will be easier for them to coordinate one each other and to take steps for treat their patients and so on. So it would be really helpful. And for the second point, to keep the livelihoods going, purpose for people and community, I think the best is Bluebird Indonesia, because You know, the government in Indonesia has taken several steps, restrictions for some cities in Indonesia, like large scale of social restrictions called PSBB. And you know, of course, the taxi industry will be hit that much, but somehow Bluebird still managed to maintain around 40,000 of its employees, and that is remarkable. And to cope up with that, it also has gained several sales other than the taxi itself. So it tried to search for the new markets, like for the car auctions, and then for e-mobility experience, and then for other than that, a lot of things to be able to still give salaries towards its employees.
Okay, thank you, Pam. That's a fantastic answer. So I think to wrap up, to spend smarter, and then second one, to engage for all audience and stakeholders, and the third one is to give
Meaningful purpose.
Earlier, we have talked about what action businesses need to take right now during the pandemic. But is that all? Because surely the pandemic won't last forever, right?
Correct. While businesses need to think about the short term or the right now, they also need to think about the medium term, which is basically the period where the pandemic, the crisis is ending and the economy is restarting. Now, this policy, all of these decisions made in the medium term are not necessarily new. Some of them exist even before the crisis begun, but they somehow just need to be maintained and emphasized throughout the crisis. And a very good example of that is Tokopedia. In 2019, Tokopedia announced BTS, an internationally known boy band group from Korea, as their brand ambassador. And of course, that created a craze in Indonesia. But then COVID-19 arrived and it hit Indonesia, it hit Tokopedia as well, but they managed to maintain their brand. They managed to keep their brand alive. How did they do that? They did that by maintaining their marketing strategy of inviting Korean celebrities and then making them star in the Tokopedia WIP TV show. As a matter of fact, the most recent collaboration was announced in October 2020, and of course, people kept talking about it and it kept the Tokopedia brand alive.
That's a very good point. After all, customers are key to business success. So we need to somehow secure our brands in their minds. So now, keeping our brand is very important. But don't we also need to make internal changes within the company? Don't you think so?
Of course, as a company, we also need to make internal preparations. And one of the things you can do is by looking at your existing portfolio and then identifying the segments, products, or services that can benefit most from the demand that has been suppressed for the past, 6-8 months in the case of this pandemic, and also that can benefit from the economic stimulus and basically everything that's going on during the recovery stage. And a good example of this is Traveloka. Traveloka knows that people are dying to travel, but obviously, during the pandemic, traveling is not an option. So they decided to think a little further into the future, specifically to a time where the pandemic is ending and people are starting to travel again. For that reason, they introduced the campaign called Buy Now, Stay Later, and also Mesin Waktu. These two campaigns basically allow people to buy vouchers for hotel stays and various activities now. So they buy them now and they'll be able to use it whenever they want at a later time, hopefully when the pandemic situation is better. And that is basically how Traveloka intends to capitalize on the economic rebound that will come together with the recovery stage of the crisis.
That's actually quite interesting. Traveloka's move is not a completely new strategy, but it's a well-timed one. However, is changing your product or service offering is the only solution?
No, not necessarily. Sometimes a new product or service offering is not what customers need. Sometimes all they need is a simple change of channels. Now, given the rapid development in technology, it is no surprise that companies are expected to move towards the digital channel. And a good example for this is Bank Rakyat Indonesia, or BRI. Since the mid-2020, this year, since mid-2020, they have launched 6 different financial services that are based on financial technology. Now, these services are not necessarily brand new. We have Kredit Usaha Rakyat, we have savings accounts, we have loan disbursements. So it's not necessarily new, but what's new is the way they deliver it to customers. So they made an online platform so that customers can access these services digitally. So yeah, that's what makes it different.
Oh, I see. So, changing the products and services is not always the only solution. Sometimes you just have to change the way you deliver the existing product or services. Alright then, ladies and gentlemen, those are the 3 actions your company can do in preparing in the recovery stage from the pandemic. We certainly hope that this will be beneficial for you and your organization.
For the long term, what should be the priorities for brands?
I think in the long term, we'll already have passed the crisis, so brands should focus less on crisis response, but more on transformations, things that could have lasting implications. I think one area where brands could start is sustainable transformation. Sustainable transformation is basically how you transform your CSR during crisis into something that creates purposeful brand engagement that engages all stakeholders across the value chain. I think sustainability has become more important because in a survey by the Indonesian Business Council for Sustainable Development, 91% of the Indonesian companies surveyed considered the pandemic to heighten the urgency to implement sustainable development goals.
But how could brands transform their CSR activities during crisis to create engagement even after the crisis?
I think that depends on what each brand is capable of doing. If we look at an Indonesian company, Cicepat, during the pandemic, it not only has donated masks, PPEs, and food supplies, but it has also helped with the construction of schools in Indonesia's rural regions, which do not have the necessary infrastructure yet to support online learning. I think this is an example of how brands could turn their CSR during crisis into something that creates engagement or has an effect even after we already passed the crisis.
Okay, but other than sustainability, what are other areas where brands could transform themselves?
I think another area that is just as important is customer experience and engagement, or CX and CE. Basically, CX and CE transformation is how brands improve the responsiveness of or add value to their customer experience. And I think a good example of this is Tokopedia. During the new normal period here in Indonesia, the company has implemented 2 changes that were designed to improve its customer experience. The first is by implementing Gandalf, an API integrated email response, and second by using an AI chatbot that could actually help solve customers' problems. And these changes were very useful. It helped Tokopedia survive times of peak traffic, when traffic could increase as much as 400% during times of big promo period.
Wow, so even a tech startup like Tokopedia still needs to undergo some transformation.
Yes, these transformations are not just for older businesses. Even newer ones could benefit from them as well.
Okay, sustainable transformation and CX transformation. Is there anything else?
I don't think this is the most important one, but this is certainly a big deal, and it's digital transformation. I think brands could improve their internal business processes by doing digital transformation.
How is the digital transformation different from the one we just discussed?
I think what we just discussed is more consumer-facing, but digital transformation is not always consumer-facing. If we look at Pupuk Indonesia, for example, it's a company with a history that goes all the way back into the 1950s. And this year, the company has started implementing ERP, or Enterprise Resource Planning, mainly in product planning and plant maintenance modules. And these are big changes, and these changes are designed to improve the efficiency and reliability and also conduct predictive maintenance for the company.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're trying to say is that even companies that have been here for decades should embrace digital transformation as well.
Yes.
Well then, that marks the end of our talk show. In the short-term phase, brands have to be able to breathe, strengthen, and activate their purposes, values, and also commitments to be able to survive in the midst of any crisis.
In the medium term, brands need to keep themselves alive, adjust their portfolios, and go digital.
For the long term, brands will need to transform their crisis time CSR, customer experience and customer engagement, and digital infrastructure to ensure that they could emerge from the crisis with a new and enduring competitive edge.
That is all from us. We hope you emerge stronger from the crisis.
Now, since I know what to do, my business is saved.